Hello everybody, and great to have you with us again for another Motorsport Magazine podcast. And we are talking to you from our brand new headquarters in Hampstead in London. And I must say it's very smart and comfortable, our new home for Motorsport Magazine up here in the north of London. And it'll be our new home of the Motorsport podcast for the future. Evermore. And I hope you can see it all, actually, can't you, with our podcast video. Anyway, what you may not know is that Hampstead is actually a bit of a hub of historic motorsport. I can see people looking surprised, but it is, because just round the corner was Jerry Marshall's Marshall Wingfield Garage, the famous Jerry Marshall saloon racer, and so was Speedwell, that John Sprinzell's company, Speedwell, which the older ones amongst us remember very well from our early days.
Graham Hill was a director.
Yes, correct.
I drove an A35 to the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
This, by the way, is Alastair Caldwell, who I will introduce in just a moment. And Graham Hill actually was born only a mile away from here. So there you go. But not only that, W.O. Bentley was born nearby as well. So as I say, we are well set up here in our new Motorsport Magazine headquarters. Welcome, Alastair Caldwell.
Hello.
Famous rally driver and the mastermind behind James Hunt's World Championship in 1976, which some of us remember like it was yesterday as well, and I'll come to that a little bit later on. But thank you very much for coming in, Alastair. I know you're off on another rally the day after tomorrow, so this is great to have you just for an hour or so now. It's the 40th anniversary this year of the 76 season, obviously, for those mathematicians amongst you. And we'll be telling you about something quite exciting to do with that a little bit later on. Anyway, Alastair, let's start at the very beginning. How did you get from being way down in New Zealand to working for the McLaren team?
Well, as a young man, I was a mechanic. I served my time as apprentice mechanic, and in New Zealand, I worked on people's racing cars, quite a few, and I worked for a company called the Motor Racing Team. Worked as a loose expression. Nobody worked, nobody paid me. I just did it from enthusiasm. Worked it in the weekends.
I know the feeling, Alastair.
And motor racing in New Zealand was not a thing you did full time. It was a summertime sport. There was nobody. I don't think there was anybody employed in it full time. It was an amateur thing. It was all semi-amateur, and people might have got expenses. But we did have this fantastic deal where we had the Tasman series, where all the Grand Prix drivers in the off season, because there was a long off season then, used to build cars, specially 2.5 litre cars, and come out and race in a series of races in New Zealand and Australia. And we used to get to race against them. And my brother became a racing driver, saved up, bought himself a car, and he raced a little Lola for a season, Lola Mark 1, which I own now. The actual car is in my garage at home. Tried to buy it for 40 years and eventually got it. And then after that season, he did another season in a Brabham single-seater, twin-cam, Lotus twin-cam engine. They had a 1500cc class, and so these were the cars, and lots of Australians and New Zealanders had them as a cheap way or low entry point for Formula racing. And so Bruce and Denny and Clark and Hill and all these people, Rodriguez and so on, they used to come and race against us. And we used to race in those actual races with them. And so this was very good. And there was a great social scene because we mixed with them. They were very relaxed in those days. They water skied, played cricket, chased the girls, got drunk. And then generally had a good time. They loved it. They loved the Tasman series, and so did we. Sadly, my brother was killed at Teretonga in one of these races, the last race of the New Zealand part of the thing, and that's the 50th anniversary. There's another anniversary. It's 50 years since my brother was killed at Teretonga, and so this was a big setback for me and my family, obviously, but it didn't really put me off. I thought, I stopped motor racing because of that. But there was a little bit of a legacy because we sold the car and he had some life insurance. So with a very small amount of capital, I could have bought a house in New Zealand as a young married man. I was already a married man with 2 small children. But for some reason, well, I'd also met race mechanics, and a lot of the race mechanics in Grand Prix racing in those days were New Zealanders. There was a huge New Zealand influence in Grand Prix racing. 10% of the drivers or more were New Zealanders. There was 3 of them, and there was Brabham as well. So there was only 12 cars on the grid or something, and there was 4 Australasians.
Yeah.
I mean, so there was a huge percentage, and a huge percentage of the workers were all Australasians and New Zealanders, and they would come on the Tasman series and say, "Oh, you should come to England, Alastair. You'll get a job. You'll get a job, no trouble." So with this in mind, I had written to McLaren saying I was going to come, but I didn't expect a reply and didn't get one. And so I flew, which cost a fortune, but in fact saved me money because I didn't come by ship, didn't lose 6 weeks' work, because in those days I was, a young married man again, had to earn. And got to England and had an aunt who lived in Gerrards Cross, and she picked me up at the airport, and then I asked her to where McLaren's were. I had no idea. Geographically, I didn't know, Gerrards Cross, Heathrow and McLaren's, I had no idea. I hadn't done any research on this. She said, "Oh, it's only 10 minutes away, dear. It's, it's in Colnbrook. I'll take you Monday morning." So she did. And there was a guy called Harry Pearce, who was the works manager, he was called. And I met him, and I said, "I'd like a job as a mechanic." And he said, "I'll go and ask." I'll ask. He didn't, and he went upstairs and talked to Teddy and Bruce. I didn't know. He just went upstairs, and he came back after 5 minutes and said, "Sorry, no, we don't need any mechanics." I said, "Well, do you have any jobs at all?" And he said, "Yeah, we need a cleaner." I said, "Well, cleaner, I'm excellent. I am a very good cleaner, believe me." And so I said, "I'll take the cleaning job."
Yeah.
So they said, "Okay, tomorrow morning here at 8 o'clock, whatever." So the next morning I started as a cleaner, and I cleaned during the day, but at lunchtime and so on I talked to the race mechanics, and at the end of the day they had this BRM engine little Formula 2 car which Bruce was running in Grand Prix racing quite successfully, funnily enough. So, almost did very well with it, in fact. And anyway, I after I finished at 5, I went over them and said, "Can I give you a hand?" And they said yes. And I remember quite clearly, they said, "Oh, you can change the ratios in the gearbox." Now, I'd never taken this kind of gearbox apart, but I took it apart and took the ratios out, and then they gave me a list. Tyler gave me a list, so I searched the building for the ratios. I couldn't find them. I didn't want to ask anybody any questions, so I searched the building. Eventually, I found the keys to the truck. I went outside, opened the transporter, and there they were. So I, sorted them out, put the old ones back, put them in the gearbox, put it back together again, and then said, "Now what?" And they kept giving me things. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning, Tyler said, "Oh, we're going to go home now." I said, "Okay." And I said, "What time do you get to work?" He said, "About 7:15. So I walked to Gerrards Cross, which took me a couple of hours, and went to bed, and then got my sainted aunt up at 6 o'clock in the morning after a couple of hours sleep, asked her to drive me back to Colnbrook, which she did. And so I got there. So when Tyler got to work, I was sitting on the wall outside, and he went, which is what he did, just grunted at me, took me inside and said, "Do this, make that, do that." So I just did. And so when Harry Pearce came to work at 9 o'clock, he said, you need a new cleaner because this bloke's a mechanic." So I worked for 8 hours as a cleaner, and the next day I was a mechanic. And I can keep talking if you want.
No, it's a great, it's a great story, and it's also a source of fantastic inspiration for anybody listening who wants to get into motor racing.
Yeah, just get inside the building.
Absolutely.
Just give them a hand.
Yeah.
I mean,
Alastair, how many people were there in total working at McLaren's at that point?
well, I didn't count them in those days, but very few. What about 10, 15, 15?
Yeah.
15? I mean, I like to tell the story that, I have a photograph, I don't have it with me, but when we won the World Championship in 74, we took a picture of everybody outside the factory with the 3 cars, with the Indy car, the Can-Am car, and the Formula 1 car, and all the people who worked in the company. Everybody. And in that year, in 74, we won the World Championship, and we ran 2 Grand Prix teams, if you'll remember. We ran 2 teams, the 2 trucks, 2 separate teams, one for Halewood and one for Fittipaldi and Hull, who had to be provided with spare cars, and all the cars had to be run in exactly the same configuration. Right. This was a nightmare, which we did. We ran Can-Am, which we won the championship. We ran Indy, we won Indy. Yeah. We won the Formula 5000 championship, which we built the car with Gethin. We won Formula 2 races with the Formula 2 car, which we built. Yeah. Now, all the employees are standing there. You know how many there are? There's 34 of them. There's 4 people, and that's two tea ladies. Mm-hmm. An accountant, a receptionist, a secretary. So the actual working people, and those people built all those cars. They didn't buy them in. They didn't assemble them like McLarens do. You know, they assembled 2 cars that they get all the bits bought in. We built 2 Indy cars, 2 Can-Am cars, 5 Grand Prix cars, Formula 5000 car, Formula 2 go, all built in-house. Every piece of suspension, every monocoque was riveted together.
Amazing.
Everything was done in that building by those people, and they won all those championships, which is a fantastic achievement.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people work at McLaren today?
Oh, it's over 1,000 to not build 2 Grand Prix cars.
It might be.
It's so farcical that it's beyond belief that they could be that stupid, that they would paint themselves into a corner like that, that they would have this car with no suspension. The car is just like a Scalextric lump of lead. You know, it's useless. The car itself is really, really, you know, it's just an engine. It's all about the engine. It's all about the electronics. The car itself can have no suspension because it's got so much downforce. It's solid as a rock. And the fact that what are they all doing?
It's probably
What can they be all doing? Apart from 800 of them watching, 200 of them watch the other 10.
Well, I expect some of them are cleaning, actually.
Yeah, and listening for the built-in speakers.
But it's very hard to know how many people.
I'm having too much fun here.
It's very hard to know how many people are actually there because it's such a big blinking place, and all the corridors are completely anonymous, all painted the same colour.
Yeah, and everybody's
how you find anybody in anything is a mystery to me.
And they don't actually wear habits, but they should.
Possibly, yes.
Because they all walk around like monks. Nobody says anything. Nobody smiles. They're all looking frightened.
We all
Well, they are.
we all hope that McLaren does a lot better this coming season, and best of luck to them because we'd like to see them back up at the front. Alastair, tell us about your first Grand Prix, which was at Monza. We're jumping around, of course, because
I'm happy to jump around.
Didn't you drive the truck?
Yes, I worked incessantly on these Can-Am cars. I was lucky because my wife hadn't arrived. She was still coming by sea, and so I was a bachelor, and so I was able to put in an enormous amount of hours, and I worked an incredible amount of hours, and I had a fantastic job, because the Can-Am car in those days, even the Grand Prix car, basically they drew the monocoque and the basic layout of the wishbones, but after that, all the oil system, water system, brake systems, and was all done by the mechanics. We designed all that stuff. We made all the gear change and all that stuff. Nothing was drawn. There was none of this business about everything being drawn to a millimetre. It was all. We made the jigs. For the suspension. We made the jigs for the chassis. We did it all, and that was fantastic fun because it was creative, apart from anything else. And you could do things. Bruce would come and say, "Oh, we got to have do this," and we'd say, "Oh, we could do it like that." We used to go to the pub literally and write literally on paper napkins. We used to do drawings and discuss, because all we ever did was talk about racing cars. That was it. We're just all totally obsessed, and we'd just draw pictures, and then that'll be the way to do it, and we'd rush back to the factory and build that. We'd make it, or we'd give it to the drawing office, so that's what it's going to look like. And so this was great fun because you were involved intimately in, when the Can-Am cars were taken to the airport to be flown to Montreal, I think, for the first race, I rode in the trailer on the car on the way to Heathrow, fitting the door locks, which I had designed and made myself. And I was fitting them to the car, and then they took me back, and I got in the other Can-Am car and fitted them to that one, and then they got in and they only got out of the car at the airport when you put it on the scales, because we were still working on them as they got rolled into the airport.
Fantastic.
And so after that, it was all a bit of a letdown because they'd gone, and suddenly we were just set to build another monocoque, a spare monocoque. And Bruce came along, and we had in the corner, we had this V12 BRM engine car. I don't know what number it is. It's a McLaren. They only made one of them. And this was the end of the 67 season. And
it said the M5A, maybe?
Yes, I don't know those numbers.
As a matter of fact.
It was a one-off.
Yeah.
They had got this V12 BRM engine and built this curved monocoque car. I remember that because it had to be wheeled. It was the last car that we had a shaped monocoque for. No, actually, I lied. The M19 was like that as well. Anyway, it was a curved car. It had shape to it, like an eagle. An eagle was a beautiful car, and this was a bit eaglish. Yeah. Bruce came to me and said, would you like to go to Monza? I said, does Rose Kennedy have a black dress? And he said, well, the truck's going tomorrow morning or this afternoon. Would you go? So I said, yeah. So I nipped back to Maidenhead, where I now had a flat, got my passport and put some knickers in a bag. And there was a guy called Mike Barney, who was the chief mechanic, and he and I climbed in the truck, or in fact I climbed in the truck by myself, followed him across London to his house where he left his car for his wife, and then we both got in the truck and drove off to Dover. I mean, that was a huge saga. I could fill up your whole program with getting the truck to Monza, which was a major feat.
They impounded the truck, didn't they?
Well, I was trying to speed it up. Yeah, we didn't have a piece of paperwork, which was called an acquis de caution, lovely name, which was a piece of paper for the spares, and we didn't have one. I didn't know it existed. But the RAC man, who was in uniform, who saluted when the truck came, he had a look at the paperwork and said, oh, you don't have your acquis? And I said, oh, of course we don't. I mean, what do you mean? And Mike said, oh, God, yeah, we don't have it. He said, don't even go to France and leave the truck here, get it tomorrow morning. But we went to France. They locked the truck up. I could flesh it out, but basically, I said to the French RSC man who greeted it, I said, why don't we bribe these guys? He said, oh, no. No, we'll be all in prison. No, not possible. You see, I said, well, everything I've ever read, you can bribe French customs just like that. No. So we stayed the night. We got up early in the morning, went back, and the truck was locked up. And poor Mike had to go up to the payphone in the restaurant, because this is pre-mobile phones, remember, and bang francs into a phone to ring up Bruce. And it was 7, and so it was 6 in England. So poor Bruce is being rung up to say, we've got to send somebody to the RSC, get this thing raised, bring it down to Dover, come on a ferry, give it to us, and go. And I was new to all this. I thought, God, that's going to take a while. We're never going to get to Monza at this rate. So I was left in the office, and I had this big suitcase which had money in it and all the paperwork, the carnets for the engine and the car and so on. And so I knew nothing of French money, but I opened it up, big brown envelope with cash on it. So I opened it up, and it was full of French francs, and the 200 franc notes were like this. They were huge. They were beautiful things. They were like a work of art. Yeah. And I got one of these out and had a look at it, and I had 2 young customs officers with me in the office of them, and they looked very interested. And I said, well, how about one of these for you, and one of these for you, and we get the big key, the Grand Clay, and we go and get the camion. They said, oh. So they folded these up, put them in their pockets with great ceremony, and then 2 of us walked up the wharf, the 3 of us, got the truck out, and I drove it down the wharf, and Mike was still on the phone to Bruce explaining what we had to do, and I went, doodle-doodle-doodle, got the truck. So off we went. And then when it got to Italy, when it got to go out of France, I was already ready for this. I had my 200, off it went. And then when I got to Italy, the same. There was 400 trucks or something queued for miles at the border, and I just passed them all. They banged on the truck, threw rocks at it and so on. Got to the front, got out, put a 10,000 lira note in each carnet, went up to the window, and the boys went, bang, 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 and off we went. We were there for 10 minutes. That guy's been there for days.
I tell you what.
Went down to Monza, parked the car in the paddock, because in those days it was this cobble thing with garages, got the car out, put all the spares in the garage, and went off to lunch. And when they turned up, we would have had a magnificent lunch, my first ever Italian meal, which I can tell you every detail of.
I bet, yeah.
But we got the car there, and this kind of made a bit of my reputation with Bruce, because I had bribed the customs in and out of France, and I could never been to France, never been, I sussed it and did it and got the truck there. So so they were very pleased with that. And then and we had so much fun. I mean, the car was red. I don't know why it was red, but it was red. And they went to scrutineering, and they said, it's not possible. This car has to be green. English cars are green. You have to paint this car green. And we said, well, we don't have any green paint. They said, well, race day, the car has to be green. So Bruce decided that what we would do, we would paint the car green completely, everything. Wheels, tyres, engine. That was our plan. And Pat was sent off to town to get some aerosols, which were a new invention. And she came back with a box of 10 or 12 aerosols, bright green aerosols. So we were going to paint the whole car, everything. just for fun. But Bruce qualified fourth, and the grid was 4-3-4 in those days. So the Italians came, I'm not making this up, and said, could you leave the car red, please? And we said, why is that? They said, well, we've never had an Italian Grand Prix without a red car on the front row, and you're on the front row, so we want it left red.
Boy, oh boy.
This is true.
Those were the days. Those were the days.
So we didn't paint it green. We were looking forward to having this green car with green wheels and green engine and green everything. But as it was, it didn't happen.
Fantastic.
And then it ran out of oil in the race. The oil tank wasn't big enough. It drank all the 3 gallons or whatever and ran its bearings. Otherwise, it was doing very well. Because that was the great joy of Monza in those days, that everybody, it didn't matter how wanky your team was, you had a chance at Monza because they all slipstreaming around. And if your boy had good Formula 3 career, you might have a chance of being third on the last lap. So what you had to be third on the last lap, so you could pass twice. Once at the back and once at round Lesbos and come over the line in front.
You mentioned Pat just now, and Patty McLaren, obviously she died just a couple of days ago. I met her very briefly in December for the first time and had a really entertaining lunch with her. Great feisty character. Could you tell me a little bit about what she was like as a person? And
well, fortunately, because of the way we were and the way we worked, we didn't have that much contact with her. But I remember once famously, we went to the tyre testing in Madrid, and I drove the truck, and Tyler came, and Pat came. And we went on that kind of mini cruise, which you go from to Santander, and we spent the whole, you spend it overnight. It's it's like a mini cruise. And she came with us, and there was Bay of Biscay was just a huge turmoil, so the ship was going. So in the dining room there were 5 people, Pat, Tyler and I, and another couple. So they put us together, and all the chairs and stuff were bolted down, and we had a good time. She enjoyed herself, and she was keen on a drink, so we did a lot of drinking, and So no, Pat was good fun.
She was the timekeeper, wasn't she, and the lap charter and everything for the team, wasn't she?
Yes, that was traditional. Yeah. That was traditional. The girlfriend of the wife was always expected to do the lap chart and do timing, and some of the girls were very good. Some of the girls were fantastic. They had a jump back watch, split. Yeah. I forget what they're called. They've got a proper name. Yeah. Stopwatch that you stop and then catches up again. Yeah. And some of the girls could time all 15 cars.
Pat Surtees was particularly good, I think, wasn't she?
And Pat used to do this. I know she could only do 4 or 5, because some of them can do all 15, but most girls just concentrate on the top half dozen. We'd say we wanted time, we'd say we want louder, blah, blah, blah. We'd say who we wanted timed, and they would clack, 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 and they could do this jump, and they would have to do the arithmetic. And then in the race, they would do a lap chart. And they would do a very good lap chart, because that's all there was. And then if you had some drama with a pit stop or something, I used to do a compromise. I used to do a survey. I'd go and see what Mrs. Tyrrell, what was her name? Nora Tyrrell. Yeah. She was great. She had a fantastic lap chart. And Chapman used to do one. Colin, he did every lap. He timed and did the lap chart, and he did a good one. And they couldn't hide it from you. So we didn't have a lap charter. But we had to go and look at Chapman's. Oh yes, and he'd go, get out of it, because he couldn't stop you really from just going, oh yeah, okay, we're third.
Brilliant.
And famously at Canada, I think it was, there was a huge controversy about who won the race, which was Fittipaldi, and hence the World Championship. And all the lap charters were arguing with the organisers' lap charters and so on.
I did. You've worked with an incredible number of drivers. I mean, just to name a few: Denny Hulme, Jody Scheckter, Peter Revson, Jochen Mass, Peter Gethin, Chris Amon, Emerson Fittipaldi, Mike Hailwood, James Hunt, and we'll talk about James in a little bit. From your perspective, which ones really, really, really stood out for you? I mean, I guess Emerson.
Emerson was a very good driver, and a hugely hard-working driver who put an enormous amount of effort into the race team. Talked, knew how to test, wanted to change the car. If anything, he was a bit too enthusiastic. He always liked new things, so we used to end up with the new car syndrome. In '74, we won the World Championship, but we never raced the car in the same configuration. It was either wider front track, narrow rear track, longer wheelbase. Oh, God, because, we would do all these configurations, and we never raced the car in the same configuration. Tell me. And because we had this contract with Holm, had to have the same gear, and so did Hailwood, we had to build 5 sets of this stuff. So boy, did we build a lot of redundant crap in '74.
Bet the mechanics loved that.
Oh, they didn't. I mean, it was just stupid, really. And I mean, management should have said, actually, we'll just secretly, Fittipaldi's car will be wide track, and the others will just be told there's our wide track. Anyway, we didn't cheat. We didn't cheat. I'd like to add that we never cheated. We never ran 2 cars that were different. We always ran 2 cars that were the same. But any Grand Prix team or any race team who's got a first driver and a second driver, the first car is going to be better, because whenever you've got 2 things, there's always one that's better than another. The simple as the engines. There's 5 engines in the truck, and you've got the dyno sheets. Who's going to get the strongest engine? And when all the tyres are mounted up, 50 sets of tyres are mounted, they're all checked for diameter, they're all checked for run out, and the number 1 set is perfect. The diameters are perfect, the run out is perfect, guess whose car they go on? And the second best set go on the same car. The third best set or the fourth best set go on the second driver. Yeah. But the nice thing about the second driver, because I used to have this, they'd say, who's the first driver? I'd say, it's quite simple. The first driver is the one who's fastest. Yes. So if you are fastest, you'll be the first driver. And if you do it for 2 or 3 races in a row, you'll definitely be. And it doesn't matter what his contract says and whether he's got number 1 printed on his forehead. He's got to be number 2 if you can blow him away.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's still the same.
Yeah,
it's
whatever
still the same. And the whole. If Webber could blow off Vettel for 3 races in a row or something, the whole team they can't help themselves. Yeah. Guess who gets the best set of tyres? Guess who gets the best clutch? Who gets the best engine? Who gets the best mechanics? Who gets the most input? From the team management. They're going to talk to him more, because now it's just human nature.
Yeah,
sure.
It is. Can I just ask you, when we're talking about Paddy McLaren, in terms of people who've recently left us, Tyler also.
Tyler,
recently.
Yes, Tyler was a bit of an enigma to me. Tyler and I were very close, and we worked endless hours together, and we talked endless hours about racing cars. And he and Bruce and I were very close. But in fact, we never socialised.
Really?
Hardly ever.
Really?
We didn't meet outside work. Huh. And Tyler had a whole life with Bruce. He lived with Bruce for years. He had actually lived in Bruce's house. Yeah. And so they were very close, and they talked obviously night and day. But I was never involved in that. I went home, and I didn't talk to anybody in motor racing at all once I left the building. Not at all. Right. I didn't even have a telephone conversation, nothing. I just went clonk, back to Maidenhead, back to my wife and children, and then very briefly, of course, because 90% of the time I was at work. I never saw my children. My children just got bigger. They got longer, because I was awake and gone before they were up, and then I came home, they were always in bed. Yeah.
Bearing in mind how close you were to Bruce, when he died at Goodwood, were you tempted to quit?
Very much so, yes.
You were there
for a few hours. Oh, yes, I put the fire out. I took him out of the car.
Yeah.
I held him until the ambulance came.
Yeah.
I was me.
Yeah.
Me and one of the Can-Am mechanics.
Sure.
Because we were running 2 cars that day, and the fire engine didn't work. And so I always used to keep a fire extinguisher and a tow rope in the boot of my car, which I kept in the pit road for that very reason. So Jim Stone and I drove round, put the fire out, and picked Bruce out of the car. And as I say, I held on to him till wouldn't let anybody else touch him until the ambulance came.
Did you see the beginnings of the accident?
Yes, people say
it
no, we saw it, but I saw it.
Right.
We didn't see the impact because you couldn't see it because it went behind the building. Sure. But the car came in view and the bodywork came off.
Saw the body
I saw the body come up. Yeah. The body popped up, lifted the back of the car off the ground. He was just a passenger, and he slid off. And the marshal's post was like a gun redoubt. It was a half-circle earth thing, which was very nice for the marshals, but of course it was like concrete. So he backed into that at 180 miles an hour or something, and came to stop in a metre. So the G-force was just too much for him.
How did you all pick yourselves up? Because it's hard to imagine. It's a tiny group of people, very close. How did you manage to pick yourselves up and get going?
I don't know. Once again, see, I didn't socialise much, with that thing. I put the crash car in the truck, literally, and the Formula One car, which was there, of course. And I drove the truck back to McLaren's and parked it up. I went home, and obviously deeply distressed. But I went to work in the morning, and so did Tyler. Because I used to go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and Tyler did as well. Yeah. We were the people who opened the factory every day. Yeah. We didn't need parking spaces. We opened the place up, and so I went to work, and so did he. And nobody said, "Oh, what are we going to do?" Yeah. I don't remember any. Other people tell you about inspirational stories from Denny Hulme or lectures from Phil Kerr, or no rubbish. We just went back to work and started work again, and it was just tactic that Bruce would have liked to us to keep going. He put all this effort into it. Why would we stop?
Well, I never knew him because he in fact he died the year before I started doing this. But it seems to me, just from so many people I've talked to who like you, he seems to be one of those people who just left his mark on everybody he ever met. Yes,
I mean, he talks ill of the dead, but Bruce was genuinely a really nice man. He was genuinely a really nice man.
Motivator and
he was a leader amongst men, but he didn't go around, he just did it. He was very good at it, and he listened to everybody. Never rubbished anybody's opinion. He was a good leader amongst men. Everybody in the place really liked him, and he'd do silly things like, as soon as a monocoque was made, as soon as it was possible for it to be steady on the jig, he would get in it and pretend to drive it and go, ooh, and make engine noises and say, boy, this is going to be quick.
Ron Dennis doesn't do that, does he?
I don't think so, no. And then nearly always when we finished a car, it would be an all-nighter, as we call them, and we would work, and there would be just chaos in the shop, whereas we just worked away. And Bruce would normally come early in the morning, and when the car was finished, we'd get in the car and we'd start it up, and inevitably he would go whoop, 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 and put 2 black stripes up the workshop floor. So when the staff came in the morning, the car wouldn't be there, the big pile of rubbish where we'd been working, and 2 black stripes up to the door. Where the car's first, its first thing was to lay rubber down the workshop.
Let's move on to something completely and utterly different, which is we've got to talk to you about. Obviously, it was the arrival of James Hunt. We're talking beginning of '76, end of '75 now. I don't think all of you were totally convinced that this was the man.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I mean, the truth is that it's very difficult to assess racing drivers because racing drivers are so much a product of their team, and there's a lot of journalists and people who don't believe this, but this is true. You just got to look at the grid. 2 green cars, 2 blue cars, 2 white cars, 2 red cars. They're all in pairs because it's the team. The driver's almost immaterial. Always has been, always will be. The least important person in any racing team is the driver. You can machine gun everybody in the factory, including the drivers, and the next race, the Mercedes cars will be on the front row of the grid. If what's his name, Lewis, and what's the other one's name?
Nico Rosberg.
Nico. If their helicopter crashes this afternoon, who's going to be on the front row of the first Grand Prix next year? Is it going to be Mercedes?
Probably.
It is, believe me, because their cars are the best. The driver's immaterial. Virtually immaterial. You could take the slowest cars on the grid, the drivers out, put them in the McLarens, and they would be crap. They wouldn't qualify, and those boys would be, taking 2 or 3 races. I'm quite serious about this.
So when it's driverless cars racing,
well, it virtually is now. What do you mean when? When? It is now.
Well, in '76, people were gravitated towards Mr. Hunt because of his flamboyant lifestyle.
Oh, yes, we were watching James, and we could see him in the pit road, and he was obviously quite a good racing driver, and he was good fun, and his team was good fun, but I wouldn't have considered him. We were negotiating with Fittipaldi, and Fittipaldi was asking for a lot more money. He was asking for 100% pay rise, which Philip Morris, who paid him indirectly or directly, I don't know actually because I didn't do but he was asking for a lot more money, and Philip Morris was saying no, and we were we went testing at Paul Ricard, and Emerson said, Alastair, you've got to convince John, Philip Morris, that I have an alternative. And I said, well, they don't think you do. They think the music stopped, because Grand Prix racing, as always, is like musical chairs. There's only so many seats, and everybody knows who's going to sit, everybody knows whose ass is going to be on what seat. So the music had stopped, and the only place for Fittipaldi was sensible place was in his McLaren. So they were sticking to their guns about the money, and he was so. And then we got this bombshell. It was a bombshell because he never gave us any inkling. It just came on the telex, because back in those days we had the clack, 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 clack. The telex machine, jing, 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 came out this press release that he was going to drive for Copersucar. And so we were out of a driver. Meanwhile, at the same time, Mrs. Hunt, Mrs. Hathaway shirt lady, pulled the plug on Hesketh. So they were out of money. And James was out of a drive. So he rang me up and said, I think I'm your new driver. And I said, I think you are. You're the obvious choice. But you better talk to Teddy about the money. But it won't be much. And it wasn't. That was one of his good motivators of the season, really, was he didn't get paid rock all. And so he was upset about this continuously. And, but it was a fantastic opportunity for him. But we had no real knowledge of how quick it would be, because the racing driver is so governed by his team that, the guy driving the Marisha, is he way better than Lewis? Yeah. Probably is. But he's in a Marisha. And James was in this team that sometimes was good, sometimes was bad. So how good he was. And we took him to Silverstone, and we had to cut the ends of his shoes off, to get him in the car. And he was too long, because he was like, we used to call him Quasimodo, because he had this little short body and big long legs. So his legs wouldn't fit in the car. So for Brazil, we moved the front bulkhead an inch and a half forward, moved the mast so he could get his legs in there. And we went off to Brazil. And I sat with Jochen on the plane. Jochen said, Alastair, who's going to be number one? And I said, we touched on this before. I said, number one's the fastest. So if you're the fastest, Jochen, you'll be number one. It doesn't matter who he is. And so we got to Monza, to Brazil, Interlagos it was. Fantastic racetrack. Yeah. And after half an hour, Jochen came in and said, how am I doing? Because they didn't have the screens on that crap in those days. You had to tell your driver. And I said, you're third. He said, where's James? I said, oh, he's eighth or something. Oh, he visibly swelled up in the cockpit. Off he went. Another half an hour came by, and he came in and says, how's it going now? And I said, not so good. I think you're 12th and James is on pole. Oh, he visibly deflated in the cockpit. Oh dear, because James was on pole. Yeah. So we knew we'd done, we'd made the right decision. Yeah. He was the obvious choice. There were others. There was, let me think, for example, X, and there was, experienced drivers, but they were all kind of proven has-beens, really.
Alastair,
proven almost.
In our next issue of the magazine, we've got a bit of a special stuff, some content coming together on Mike Hellwood. Oh, yes. So if Mike hadn't had his accident at the Nürburgring in '74, do you think he could have led McLaren?
Yes. Oh, he would have got the job for sure. Yeah.
And was he good enough?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he was good. Yeah. He was good. He was a bit relaxed about his motor racing, but he might have got a bit more serious, had he got the top slot. But he was good enough, yeah.
Alastair, you paint a lovely picture of the kind of boys on tour ambience of the 1960s, obviously tinged with tragedy at times. Was there a specific time during the 70s when it stopped being as much fun and became more of a, and the commerce kind of began to outweigh the sort of spirited boyishness?
Yes, I don't know. I don't really follow that one. I understand what you mean, but it was always commercial. It was always a business. We were in business. We were having to raise money, borrow money, whatever, get sponsorship to go motor racing. We just didn't get enough to make it we were amateur really in a way when you think back at it. You know, McLaren's. We used to do the American and we used to do 3 races in North America with 3 personnel. I mean, he took 3 people for a 2-car Grand Prix team. That was it. It was a 3-man team, and one of those was old and tired and didn't want to work. So it was actually a 2-car team, and we did everything.
Who was
we
that?
prepared the cars, and we took the spares down at the back. We took all the tyres down there, and then we took it all back again. Then we worked all night, and then we did that. We loved it. It was so stupid. It was just stupid. I mean, who thought that 3 guys could run a Grand Prix team on their own with no support from the management? Management would just turn up in the morning, how's it goes, kick the tyres, get them drive, and then bugger off back to the golf course. And we thought, oh, there we were, completely knackered, and we never complained. We loved it. We got paid rock all. So, yes, it was like that, but some people, it just gradually came that people thought, this is stupid. You know, Ferrari started to do it. Ferrari's had 30 people at the racetrack. You know, we had 11. You know, they had 2 lawyers. We didn't have anybody. You know, we didn't have a PR person. We didn't even like journalists. We chased them away. We told them to bugger off because we were too busy to even talk to them. There was only 2 or 3 journalists that I would talk to. Ones were sensible ones, but of course we should have had somebody talking to all of them, even the really stupid ones, the ones from the local newspaper who wanted to know what the drivers had for breakfast. Somebody should have been telling them they eat cornflakes. You know, whatever. We should have, but we didn't. We chased them away. Go away. You know. And we just talked to the professionals because there were 2 or 3 who, you know, really followed it and knew exactly. Because that was one of my problems. My problems was that I, without trying to be too big, I was aware of everything that was going on. I still am, but in those days I was very, very aware of everything that was going on. I didn't need to talk about it at all. Now, a lot of people need to talk about things they're doing, but I never did. And I used to try and hire people who also didn't need to talk about it. So you had this group of taciturn-looking, you know, who didn't say anything, but won the world championship. Because you didn't need to talk about it, you just needed to do it. And I didn't like my boys talking to anybody because then they gave away information. Really, seriously, you know, we just stay like a little club. Don't talk to anybody because as soon as you talk to anybody, even a journalist, you give away stuff. Sure. Teddy was terrible. Teddy gave technical, because he wanted to have his ego inflated. He would tell them, oh yeah, we're doing this and we're doing that. Be quiet, shut up. You know. Anyway,
well, actually,
yeah, so I don't remember any kind of step. It just gradually got more professional. Teams hired more and more people, including McLaren's. You know, we got bigger and bigger and bigger, but still tiny by today's, and it got more commercial. You know, all the tobacco company came in and there was more money involved. Started talking millions of dollars instead of thousands of dollars and so on. But I don't remember any kind of, you know...
It didn't become any less fun as a result?
Yes, it did. In the end, I stopped having fun. But that was probably the kind of classic thing where I got promoted to a sort of situation where I was incompetent, which happens in many companies. And you know, I should have been left doing what I used to do. But they gave me an office upstairs and I wore a jacket and a tie and I ran the company. And I was not interested in running the company. I wanted to run the race team and build the race cars. And that's why I left McLaren's, because we were going downhill because Teddy was doing my job and I was doing his job. We did a role reversal, which he wanted, because he wanted to be the star car builder and he was useless at it. And so after a couple of years of this, I said, this is stupid. You know, we should do, I'm going to wear boots and jeans, have my office downstairs with the big window where I can see what everybody's doing. You get back upstairs and we'll win the world championship again. And he said, no, we're not going to do that. And he just kept hiring more and more people to do my job instead of having me. You know, they had now had half a dozen guys, had a committee doing what I used to do all on my own, because I said, do that, which is, when you're a small company, is very good to have somebody who just, you know, sometimes they're wrong, but most of the time just having somebody just, anyway, we fell out over this because I wanted to go back and do how we used to do, and he wanted to stay in charge, so I left.
You went to work for Brabham, and we'll come to that in a minute, but we're now going to get a bit deeper into 1976, Alastair, because it's, as I said earlier, it's 40 years since that incredible season. And we're going to look back at Brands Hatch 76 in the July. Would you like to take over this? Or
I'll just explain briefly, Rob. Yeah. So what we're going to do, our July issue, obviously time of the British Grand Prix is always July. It seemed like a good time to do a bit of a celebration of Brands Hatch and that incredible race in 76, which for a lot of people was kind of the start of the modern era, in the sense that the Sun readers were suddenly engaging in motor racing, the wider public. It wasn't just about the enthusiasts, and obviously that amazing day with the cans on the track and everything that happened that day. It's a story that's been told many times, and we've been over it many times. And when the Rush film came out, we talked about it again. So what we thought this time we'd do is ask you, the listeners and the readers of Motorsport, to tell us about your memories of 76 and Brands Hatch 76. Many of you would have been there. I was only 2, I'm afraid, so I don't remember it. Sorry, I had to put that up. But
I was 32, but and in my prime.
we'd love you to tell us stories about your memories of that weekend, that day. Were you one of the guys that threw cans and bottles on the track? I'm not looking at you, Rob, at all. Don't worry.
No, I have the photographs.
We want to basically get you to tell the story for once, rather than just do the usual story from the paddock side. Get the public to tell us about it as well.
Great idea. And just for those of you who may be new to our Motorsport podcast, that was our editor, Damien Smith, who obviously is in charge of what goes into the magazine, speaking to you there. And let me remind you that if you want to get in touch about Brands Hatch 1976, then there's a hashtag. And it's hashtag Brands76. That's Brands, as in Brands Hatch, 76, figure 7, figure 6. On social media, that's Twitter and Facebook, and all of you know, everybody knows all about that. But if you don't, no, I know you don't, Nigel, but that's a different. Let's not go there. Nigel has come all the way to North London from his hideaway somewhere in Surrey or Sussex. Well, they don't have hashtag down there, I don't think. But anyway,
They have it.
okay, but apart from the editor-in-chief Nigel Roebuck,
hashtag Luddite.
you can use hashtag Brands76 on Twitter and Facebook, or if you don't want to do that, you can always email us, which is editorial@motorsportmagazine.com. editorial@motorsportmagazine.com. And just to remind you, please get in touch, because we want you to be in Motorsport Magazine. It's usually all of us all the time. Now it's your turn. So if you were there, Brands, the big hot summer of 76, who can ever forget it? My God, what a fantastic weekend that was. Anyway, if you were there, please get in touch on the hashtag or the email. Now, one man who was absolutely at the epicenter of that weekend is Alastair Caldwell, who's our guest today. And by this stage of the season, things between McLaren and Ferrari were getting a little bit tense, weren't they, Alastair?
Well, they always were. Remember, we've been at it with them for several years now. It was Ferraris. The top of Grand Prix racing was Ferraris versus McLarens in those days, 74, 75. So it was an ongoing thing. 76, their car was actually probably very good. Anyway, so yes, there was definitely tension between the two of us, and they had full-time lawyers who travelled with them all the time. We didn't, and so they were into politics, which we weren't. We didn't play politics at all, and which was foolish, of course. We touched on this a minute ago. We should have had a lawyer, and we should have had a PR person, but we didn't. Anyway, so 76, yes, I'm interested in that because there's so many journalists, so many stories, books written even, and it's all disinformation, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty clear exactly what happened in 76 because I was the orchestrator of it all. I didn't start the accident, of course. The two Ferraris ran into each other.
Yes.
Clay tried to go around the outside. Nicky didn't make it. Ran over him. Chaos ensued. James ran over the back of Clay's car. Car flew up in the air, way up in the air. Philip Morris were always disappointed they didn't have Philip Morris underneath of the car because it was in every newspaper in the world.
Yeah,
they did seriously talk about putting Philip Morris, Marlborough, underneath the car. So next time it flew through the air, it would be on anyway. And the car landed on its left front and bent the left front wishbone. So the wheels were now like this, and the toe-in was massively gone awry. The front wheels were pointing the wrong way. But being James, not all the other drivers would have pulled over on the side of the road. But being James, with those 2 pints of adrenaline still to go, which he always had, he set off round the racetrack, and he set off up Paddock Hill to Druids, And this was followed by the TV, because the TV was following James Hunt, not, and Nicky and maybe Clay, I don't know, but no, Nicky went off, and James followed him up the hill, and he went round Druids and came down the hill, and by now already the marshals had the cross flags out. Races stopped. And the big gantry lights at the top of the start-finish line were banging red. So the race was stopped. So we were already into race stopped mode. Race is stopped, now what do we do? And already I knew instantaneously that I couldn't start my T car, the training car. That's against the rules. In Grand Prix racing then, only cars that were taking part in the race when it was stopped could start again. So the cars that were crashed at the start were not in the race, because they weren't taking part when it was stopped. But James was definitely taking part in the race when it was stopped, because the cameras were running. You can see it on the TV, cross flags, and he's driving his car. There it is, and he drove it down the hill, and because the race was stopped, he pulled in behind the pits, and the Brands Hatch is very short. It's steep, but it's 50 feet, really. It's 100 yards or less, just down the hill. And he ran up the hill, found me. You see that on the film, because he comes running with the helmet with his hair flying, and says, the car's destroyed. Because racing drivers always tell you this. The opposite in life is always the truth. He said, the car's finished. And I said, okay, sadly, we'll get the T-car out and put it on the grid, but we won't be allowed to start, because that's against the rules, but we'll do it. So we got the T-car, and the boys with the T-car took it out, and I went myself. I strolled down the hill, I didn't race, and found the car, which was just parked there. And the front wishbone was bent, and otherwise the car was perfect. So I ran back up the hill, and because we had very few employees, I took the 6 mechanics off the 3 cars and said, get that car and change the left front suspension. I got the truck driver, get the suspension, a wishbone, bring a set of front suspension, and they pushed the car into the garage, and they started work. Meanwhile, there was now a stewards meeting going on. Dean Delamont, I think it was, from the RAC, had called a meeting, and all the team managers were in there, including Teddy, and Odetto, of course, and Ferraris, and everybody, and Tyrrell's, Ferrari, Ligier, Surtees. All these teams had T-cars on the grid, which were not allowed to start the race, legally. So I went in, and all the team managers, including mine, Teddy, owner, were saying we must start the T-cars. And I joined in, said, yeah, must be able to start T-cars, must start T-cars. I didn't tell Teddy we're trying to fix the race car, because Teddy would have said, we're trying to fix. So I didn't tell him. So then I tore back to the garage and oversaw the repairing of the car, tore back to the meeting and went, we'll start our T-cars forever. And now coming on the PA system was that James Hunt was not going to be allowed to start the race because he was in his T-car. So people started to get upset. The crowd was getting upset and started to chant and throw stuff. We want Hunt, we want Hunt. And this was all good stuff, because this was putting pressure on the RAC and so on. But it was still quite unequivocal. T-cars would not be allowed to start the race. But I went back to the meeting and said, we'll all agree. They were all arguing. We'll all agree. We'll all sign a form that says T-cars are allowed to start. And of course the people who didn't have T-cars said, no, sorry. An edit coming here. Hopefully you can edit this. I went in and said, and they said, we'll sign the form. And of course all the people who had cars who didn't have T-cars on the grid said, no way. No, we want them taken off, because everybody in Grand Prix racing is only ever just interested in their own personal business. It's still the same. They'll never ever look at the picture, which is why Bernie still rules the place. He rules because they're so stupid. They will never form a consensus amongst themselves. And he knows this, so he just plays them off against each other. But we've jumped around now. So I went back to my car, got it fixed, drove it myself through all the people. If you see it in the film going blah, 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 that's me driving it, because I used to drive them all the time. I drove it down, reversed it up on the grid, and we had left Denny Holm, who was a visitor there, paid for it because he only came if he was paid, because he was observer or something for the John Stewart. Maybe started when they started to have experts. Anyway, he was invited there, so we left him with James and said, just sit here, don't let the marshals move the car. If they try to move the car, jam the brakes on them and tell them to go away politely. And just keep it here as a block. And it worked. Well, they didn't try to move it. And so we pushed the T car out of the way, put the proper race car, which was the car that started the race. So it was allowed to restart the race because it was taking part in the race when it was stopped. Went back to the meeting and said, we've taken our T car off the grid. I didn't say, and I've put my race car on. I just said, and Teddy was like, what? I said, yeah, we've taken our T car off the grid. We agree. But they started the race with all the other T cars on the grid, which was interesting, because Dean said, we can't do this because one of them crashes or finishes in the points. What are we going to do?
One of them was Clay, wasn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, they started the race. James started in his race car, and he won the race. It was a bit screw-iff because the boys didn't have time to really set it up. So it took him a few laps to get used to the handling, because it was handling better one way than the other, because the wheel weights were all screwed up. And then he passed Nicky and won the race fair and square. So James Hunt won the British Grand Prix in the car that started the race at absolutely 100%. And interestingly enough, because I can extrapolate, the only car that should have been on the grid was James Hunt. Only car that could have started legally the British Grand Prix, because the rules then said when you're shown the red flag, you must stop where you are. Not finish the lap. The rules said quite unequivocally, stop where you are, but always people used to drive slowly round to the grid. But Nicky didn't. Nicky tried to get the race not started. Nicky was a smart boy. He knew the red flags were out, but he kept racing, and they kept racing, and he raced over the top of paddock. You see it, there it is on the video. He comes full speed over paddock, because he's trying to get them to change their minds, which has happened before. There had been other Grand Prix where the red flag had been put out, everybody kept racing, they all went,
and also,
okay, let's switch it off again. So Nicky was trying that one on, and you see in the movie that the marshals are going, stop. So he skids to a halt and does another lap. Still under a rule that says you must stop where you are, and does another lap. So Nicky did 2 laps under the red flag. He crossed the start-finish line at full speed under the red flag, didn't get disqualified, and was allowed to start the race. So I can extrapolate that the only person that should have started the British Grand Prix on his own, on the grid, because it was the only legal car, was James Hunt. And there was nothing in the rules that said you had to complete that lap. The opposite. It said you had to stop where you are, which is what he did. Now, Ferraris played the politics and invented a rule which didn't exist. And when they had the tribunal at the Place de la Concorde, the 3 old geriatrics got led in.
We should just make clear that this hearing in Paris was
later, way later in the year, just with the Canadian Grand Prix.
Just before,
We were testing at Mosport when the news came through, and that was one of the few times that James fell out with Nicky, because Nicky was taken by Ferraris to the Place de la Concorde, sat in the seat outside with a bandage, a big white bandage with stage blood on it. I'm not making this up. So when the 3 old boys came, they were introduced to Saint Nicky, the man who'd risen from the dead, with the bloody bandage. Oh my God. They went in and said, and all we did was show the movie of James driving the car at Brands. And we had the director from the TV company to say that this was unretouched. This was, because that was the only possible argument to have him out of the race, that he wasn't taking part in the race when it was stopped. But he was. There was the flags, the light, James driving his car. So as far as we're concerned, there was no case to answer. We couldn't imagine what Ferraris were on about. Ferraris told the boys that you had to finish that lap, and James didn't finish that lap, which is the opposite of the truth, and therefore would be excluded. So they excluded him.
It's an absolutely...
That, I believe, is the actual true story. But I may be stand corrected. I've never seen any journalist write the right story. They're always different from that.
Well, just to repeat that we really want you guys out there, you're listening to us today, and tell your friends that you can join in this story yourselves. You were there, and lots of you must have been there, and Alastair, as we heard, right in the thick of it. But my God, the crowd were fantastic.
They were fantastic, because the little bit I was telling you about running from the meeting to fix the car, the people in the stands, the 10,000 people there, sussed it. They knew exactly what I was doing. Nobody else did, but the people in the stand said, look, they've got the race car. Oh, they're fixing it. And I ran down here, and then they came back, and each time I came back, they cheered some more. And then we actually started the car up and drove it forward. And then I realised that Steve Bunn, where are you, Steve? He's out there somewhere. He was doing the tow-in with this thing called a Dunlop gauge. And in his excitement, he'd got a whole degree out. You know, so it was 10 minutes, but it was a degree in 10 minutes. And I realised the front wheels were like that, you know, and snowplow. So, put it back in the garage, and the crowd all went, whoa.
Yeah. It was great.
They understood. It was nearly fixed. And then we adjusted the tow in properly, and I drove it, and the crowd, oi! Because now, so you had the running commentary from 10,000 people who had sussed out what I was doing. The meeting hadn't sussed it out. Yeah. No officialdom has sussed out what I was doing, but the crowd had.
Just for fun, let's jump forward to Fuji at the end of the year, where James won the World Championship, which I know is a whole story in itself. But the fact is,
a lifetime in between.
Absolutely, I know. But we'll get you back. We'll get you back when you're not rallying. But anyway, I know that the crowd there was a big factor as well, wasn't it? Because
yes, and that was created by us.
Yes.
That was fascinating.
Because it was torrential.
We had a young man called Lance Gibbs, where are you, Lance? He's in Indianapolis. He has a car livery company. He does stickers and stuff. I think he's retired now, but he had a very successful company in Indy, which did all the logos and stickers and stuff for Indy cars. Anyway, Lance Gibbs, New Zealander, never wore shoes, always wore flip-flops, very Kiwi. And we call him the entertainment officer because he did all the sign writing and helped with the tyres, but he was also, entertainment officer. And we had James and Nicky in the tower at Fuji arguing with the stewards that the race should not be held, vehemently, insistently, along with Jarier, who was the other member of the safety committee. When there's a joke, Mad Dog Jarier. Anyway, the three of them, but Nicky and James arguing, and I would say to James, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh no, it's far too wet, old chap. We can't possibly race." I said, "Yeah, come on, you got to race, otherwise we can." Oh, no. He was absolutely adamant we shouldn't race. So I was going up to the tower with Bernie and arguing with and going back down again because only Bernie and I were really excited having the race run. And the two drivers, Nicky and James, were trying actively not to have it run. And we had 20,000 Japanese in the stands who were totally enigmatic, doing nothing, just sitting there. They'd been there for hours in the rain and the cold. And I was getting my cars to start every 20 minutes or something and rev the engines up, which would make all the others start. Because they didn't know why, but whoop, 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 whoop. And the whole pit road would be going whoop, 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 whoop. And then it'd stop off again. And I was trying to get, nothing was happening. So I said to Lance, do you think you could get this crowd going, in some way? And he said, I'll give it a go. And we had things called Acme Thunderers, which you look up on the internet. There's a company called ACME which builds whistles, and they build thousands of whistles. You can imagine the different kinds of whistles you can buy. But there's a thing called an Acme Thunderer, which is a referee's whistle, which is the one that's used in the Premiership worldwide. It's made by an English company. And I had bought these for my boys because they used to drive the car, push the cars around the paddock and injure people because there was silent death and the front wing would trap people by the ankle and so I said, you've got to have the whistles and go beep, 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 beep. So they liked this. And they all had one. So then they had a band, they used to practice boop, 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 and they used to play with their whistles and use them on airplanes and cause all kinds of trouble with their whistles. They liked them. Anyway, so Lance stood on top of the Armco in front of all these Japanese, hung his arms out and went boop, 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 boop. And by a miracle, 200 Japanese had whistles. There were referees or there were rape alarms. I don't know. Lots of them had whistles. So they went boop, 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 boop. So we went beep, 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 boop, beep, beep, beep. And they all went boop, boop, beep, 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 beep. And he had this orchestra going. Here they were imitating whatever he was doing. He was good on his whistle. So now we had all these Japanese really, really interested in Lance. They were all like, something was entertainment now. Otherwise, it'd be nothing. So I said to him, see if you can teach them to slow clap. So he went, and they all went. There we go, like that. Off they went. And I don't know if you've ever been involved in this, but as you go faster and faster, it gets louder and louder, and then people can't keep pace. And when you get to so many beats per minute, it breaks up, and it makes a huge noise. the lack of simplification goes, whoa.
Yeah.
And the crowd thought, that's nice. That's interesting. Let's do that again. So I left Lance doing this again. And now we had this clapping, and then this whoa, and then again and again, because they were cold, bored, and now they had this activity. Well, this Lance was doing, standing there in his flip-flops. So I went back up to the tower. Bernie was there. Bernie said, "What's that?" I said, "We've got the crowd going. It's fantastic." And got the stewards came on, these small Japanese Asian gentlemen, and said, "Look, you've got a ride in your hands, mate. You better start the race, otherwise there'll be bodies everywhere." They're really upset down there. And they're all, race. Boom, boom. Result. So I can honestly say, without a lie, that Lance Gibbs won the World Championship for McLaren, because he got the crowd going, the crowd got noisy, and the stewards got disturbed by this. They didn't like the fact that the crowd was excited. A bit like Brands Hatch with the same thing as 70. And so they started the race in the dark. Needed headlights, really.
I just love the idea of 200 Japanese referees in the grandstand.
I don't know why they had whistles, but they did. They had pea whistles, not. Boop, 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 boop. And so this concert went on. I'll be quiet.
Okay. Well, I mean, we could talk about McLaren in those days until it gets dark tonight. It's just so much fun. But I think it's great. If only we had some crowd involvement in modern Grand Prix racing, it would just be great. Anyway.
Some crowd to be a start, yeah.
Or even some driver involvement.
Okay.
Some involvement would be good.
Actually, Alastair, excuse me, Rob, interrupting 1 second. I'm sorry to disturb the chronology, but just something, when you were talking about when you were driving the car to the grid at Brands, I'm taking you back now to 68, to McLaren's first Grand Prix win at Spa. I'm sure, forgive me if I'm misremembering this, I'm sure I remember you telling me about driving the car from the paddock back to...
Yes.
Because the garage was...
In Spa, we had a garage at Malmoldi. We had a garage, which was a Ford agency, right at the bottom of the circuit.
Yeah.
The far end, because there was no pits.
Didn't you drive the car down Master?
Yes, we used to do a lap a day. We used to get in the cars in the morning, warm them up, and then drive them, walk cold, if you like, to the pits, park them in the pits. And then after practice, everything was good. We'd get in the cars and do the second half of the lap. And now it was fully manned, marshals, because there was going to be another race in a minute or whatever. And we used to go quick. We used to really fly down that straight. And that was the old straight, which had a kink in it. It had a railway line and a kink. It was impressive, I tell you. And then we used to choose the revs we'd do. A little guy called Alan McCall and we would say, okay, today we'll do 9 grand. And then we'd get the pits and have a look at the ratio chart. Oh, is that fast or what? Tomorrow we'll do 9.2, which was 175 miles an hour, whatever. Because the cars in those days are just as quick as they are now. They had a lot less horsepower, but they had a lot less drag. There was no wings on the car. Now, they did 180 miles an hour, whatever, in those days. And so we used to go pretty quick down that straight, and that was the straight with the railway line and the kink. No helmets, hairs, and I like that story because in '67 or '68 was it? Bruce won Spa in his own car, and that's the thing that cemented my position again in the company. Was that he turned up from the Can-Am race with some drive shafts which he had made for the Formula 1 cars. He knew the length, he had the drawing or whatever, and they had these very light pot joints, they're called, with a single pin, which do both the plunge and the turning, and they're half the weight. And the drive shafts we had, which were made by an English company, BRD, I think they were called BRD, they're horrible things, heavy, horrible, unreliable, but it was all we had, And so he came with these new lightweight drive shafts, and stupidly we put them straight on the cars. He said, put them on. So we put them on, and we did practice, did the 2 days of practice. We drove the cars down to the garage, and little Al had no engine change. I had an engine change. We had virtually 2 people per car. That was it. It was 2 mechanics per car, dirt floor in a garage. And I changed my engine along with Jim Murdoch, who was my guy I worked with, and little Al, who had more time in his time, took one of these drive shafts apart and found that they had slightly gall inside. what we call picked up. There was a little bit of damage. He said, "Oh, it's no problem. I'll just stone that off, re-grease them. They'll be great." And I said to Jim, "I don't think so. Take ours off." So we unbolted ours, put them in the truck, and put the horrible big heavy ones back on. And we did another half lap back to the pits. And Bruce came to work in the morning, rolling along on his short leg, and said, and he instantly picked it up. He said, "Oh, where's the drive shafts gone?" And I said, Little Al had a bit of slight problem with one of his, and I've taken them off. He said, "Oh, I don't think so." He went to talk to Little Al. Little Al told him, "Yeah, they're going to be great." So he came back to me and said, "Alastair, put the drive shafts back on." I said, "I don't think there's enough time." He said, "There's an whole hour, you could do it 10 times. I said, "Oh yeah, but things might go wrong. Might strip a thread, and might, something, best not to play with it now." So after some discussion, he got upset, and the only time I've ever had him upset, because his normal man management, which was to persuade me to do this, I refused, basically. I didn't refuse, I just kept making excuses. So he stomped off, which he didn't do well, but he went, and he stomped off. And everybody in the team went, "Whoa, you pushed the boat out a bit there." I said, "Oh yeah, but I believe it's the right thing to do." Oh, he was angry. Well, he never did angry. This was very, very unusual. So I started the race, and Denny was super confident for whatever reason. Denny only won races. He was super confident, and he probably had a softer compound, or he was running second, I think, to somebody like Fittipaldi or something. But he was obviously going to win the race, because that was Denny. He was right there. He's going to win this race. He's just going to follow this turkey until he's ready, and then he's off. And so he ran second, I think. I don't think he ever led it, but he was certainly running and was going to win it. And then after 30 laps or whatever, you'd have to look it up in the books. He came in, right-hand drive shaft was melted. And Bruce was fifth, I think. He was in the points. And then with a couple of laps to go, I think, as usual, half the cars ran out of fuel. They always did at Monza, at Spa. You can't imagine how stupid racing teams are. They would start the race with not enough fuel in them. Anyway, and he was fifth, then he was fourth, then he was third, and then with a lap to go, I realised that the car that was leading didn't come around, so I put P1 on the board before I even knew, because who was leading, I forget now, you could look it up, and put out P1, yes! And he came by, and he didn't really believe it, a bit like James at Fuji. He came in the pits and he stood up in the pit and he said, "First," I said, yeah, you won the race, fantastic, McLaren and the McLaren, brilliant." And he said, "What happened to Denny?" And I said, "Drive shaft." There was not another word was spoken. It was good enough. So from then on, if I wanted to do something, more or less, if I thought it was a good idea, it was stayed a good idea, because he won it because he didn't have these drive shafts on his car.
Sure. Okay, well look, we're rather running out of time, but I very much hope that when you've finished your world tour in 2016 in your Rolls Royce or your Ford Escort or your Ferrari or whatever, you will come back to Motorsport headquarters in Hampstead and talk to us again, will you?
Yeah, sure. Good. Yeah, I love talking. Good. Especially about all those days, because we had good times. They were good times.
And these are the days that you refer to, I know, as BR, aren't they?
Yeah, before Ron.
Yes. Which is kind of a nice joke, really, isn't it? Anyway, before we, I must just say, and I'm looking at our website editor, Ed Foster, as I speak, that we haven't had time for our readers' questions. Now, time for one or two. Okay, time for one or two. Well, one comes in from Wimbert, which sounds Belgian, and he wants to know what went wrong with McLaren after '76. What?
Everybody's. After '76, what happened was the Can-Am faded away because Porsche came and destroyed the McLaren thing, and people didn't like watching Porsches win Can-Am. They liked McLaren's winning McLaren, but they didn't like Porsche's winning, so they all went home. So that faded away. And so this big stream of revenue and interest from McLaren's died away. So Teddy and Tyler, but particularly Teddy in my case, came home. Tyler stayed with the IndyCars, but Teddy came back to Europe and decided he wanted to run my team, which was the Grand Prix team. And he used to come as a guest, if you like. He would turn up, but he'd been busy with Can-Am or Indy, so he would turn up and interfere with what I was doing, but not enough to destroy it. But when he came back, he literally took my job and promoted me, and I believe that the team just went steadily downhill from then on. And the more he got involved and the more people he hired to help him, the less effective we got. And for sure we would have recovered. In fact, I think they started to recover. Then we won the British Grand Prix with Watson in 81.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad, but I also had stopped enjoying myself as well. The team wasn't doing so well, in my opinion, and also I'd stopped enjoying myself because I wasn't doing what I used to do. I was, dealing with hire cars and hotels and administration, whereas I wanted to build racing cars, which I thought I was very good at. So I decided to stop, and so I quit. So I would have said the lack of success in Can-Am meant that Teddy concentrated too much on the Grand Prix team, and he wasn't a good influence. And because he was the boss, he could, it wasn't like Bruce. It was different. With Bruce, I could have won, but with Teddy, I wouldn't win. Teddy would say, no, we're going to do it like this. I go, okay.
It's interesting how a racing team can quite quickly go downhill, can't it?
Yes, it's all about people. Your race teams are all about people, nothing about buildings or cars. It's all just about people. If you've got the right people, and most Grand Prix teams, there's probably only 2 or 3 people who are actually important. There's 1,000 people at McLaren's, but only 900. You can do without 980 of them. There's the top management who are the important people. This is where you see this with Ross Brawn and Newey and so on. If you have this dominant, really clever person, then they win the world championship. It's all about people.
Sure.
Any business is all about people.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite a few of our readers, and I'm just trying to pick out the most popular questions, really. Want to know about being at Brabham and I mean, very, very different days.
Oh, Brabham was a totally different deal, because we had Bernie, of course, and but I went to Brabham's because I wanted to work with Gordon Murray, because Gordon Murray is a genius, which he is, and he's a very clever man, and I admired, so I wanted to work with him. But it didn't really work that well because we won the World Championship. I taught them how to win the World Championship. I wasn't there when they won the World Championship, but I taught them how to do it. Because when I went to Brabham's, they were a team that just wanted to be fast. And it was very interesting that I'm amazed, like football teams, Fulham stay Fulham, even though they've had 10 different managers, and Brabham stayed Brabham's. Jack was totally silly in that Jack put all the new stuff on his car and his car broke down, and Denny Hulme won the World Championship. And even with that example, he couldn't stop himself. And you don't win the World Championship by putting all the new stuff on your car. You win the World Championship by having your car reliable, and then you put new stuff on it. And when I went to Brabham's, all they wanted to do was win races, and you don't win championships by trying to win races, which is what all they wanted to do. Nelson, Gordon, and Bernie all wanted to put the new stuff on the car, and I had to fight tooth and nail with them to make the car reliable. Really, it was an uphill battle, but I won, and they won the World Championship. But they had no idea, and they soon regressed. I would say that once I left, took them a couple of seasons, and they went back to doing their old ways of sometimes winning races, sometimes being hopeless. They lost the consistency and they lost the reliability again. And being consistent and being reliable, now it's so much easier for them because they've got thousands of people doing the reliability and so on. Whereas in my day, it was just me at McLaren's. I did all the changing of all the components just by instinct almost. Yeah. Now they have people who are lifing every component. They change the components every day and so on. But I can go on for hours. But they're so stupid, of course, that they don't need to do that. All they have to do is put the weight of the car up by a couple of 100 kilos, and all their troubles would be over. But they're too stupid for that.
Okay, right. We'll take one more question, but I must just say thank you very much, everybody, for sending in your questions, and I must apologise we haven't got through many, but I hope and I think you'll agree that we've had a great time with Alastair Caldwell, and next month we'll deal with more of your questions, but we'll take one last one, which is about Nelson Piquet. Now, I know you. People have very, very widely differing views about Nelson Piquet, don't they?
Yes, I once again I read this, but to me, Nelson was probably to me my best racing driver.
Really,
of all the people that drove for me.
Really,
Nelson was fantastic.
Right.
He was.
There's a question
because he was in his early days, with Brabham's, and he was enthusiastic, fast, funny. We had a lot of fun. As a team, Gordon, we were like a little family, and he was brilliant. He was a very good racing driver, very fast, good tester.
Worked hard, didn't he? He worked hard.
He worked hard. He worked hard, and he was fun. He wasn't dour. We had fun. We rolled in the sand, if you like. We played, but also he played really hard, and he's a very quick racing driver and smart. He's a good boy. I would rate him as my best driver.
Really?
I mean, James was good, but James wouldn't work. James was lazy, didn't want to do testing. He said he wanted to do testing. James knew exactly what racing drivers should do. He had a manual. He knew what Nicky did. So he didn't have he just got out of the car. Really wanted to just go home, and that's what we should have done. We should have got somebody else, Mass or somebody else to, like they do now. They have they have junior drivers who do the testing, whatever. But in those days, we didn't have any of that. We didn't even have a test team. Yeah. Anyway, Nelson to me was the best, my best racing driver, from a kind of social, trying, speed, enthusiasm. He was so keen. He was like a little game dog.
Yeah. And boy, those Brabhams were such beautiful Grand Prix cars, weren't they?
Though I did forget one thing there. I did forget, because he never got to be my driver properly, was Villeneuve. Because I forgot. Because if Villeneuve had stayed with McLaren's, he would have been our best racing driver for certain.
Well, that's one of Teddy's.
That was one of
unfathomable decisions.
Teddy terrible decision, because he was just brilliant. I mean, we rang him up. James came back from Trois Rivières and said, I raced against this kid. This kid is really good. And this was the world champion or potential world champion, I forget now. And it's rare for racing drivers to praise other racing drivers. He came and said, you should hire this kid. This kid is absolutely fantastic. So we rang him up and said, we hear that you're good. Our driver tells us that you're good, and we might think about running you in the Canadian Grand Prix and maybe the American Grand Prix, because that's what we used to do. At the end of the season, we used to run 3 cars sometimes, because it didn't matter if they crashed the car. We coming to the tail end of the season, we could afford to lose a car and run a 3rd car. And he said yes, he'd love to do that, and he's kind of broken English. And the next day, the receptionist rang up and said, there's a young man here called Villeneuve wants to come and see you. He said, oh, okay. Now, he had put the phone down and gone, bought an airline ticket and flown to England. Got himself from Heathrow to Colombo without asking where the address was or anything. He didn't ask us to pick him up. He turned up in the reception, unheralded, because he thought, if these boys are interested, I'll go and see them. He had a manager, I don't know his name. Remember?
Oh.
Yeah.
Was it the guy that wrote the books?
Gaston Parrell.
And anyway, he must have said, don't muck about, kid. Buy yourself a ticket. And it worked, because he came in the reception, we took him upstairs, we showed him the drawings, we showed him the cars, he sat in the car, made engine noises, tried to drive it, and was obviously, so we said, okay, we'll run him in the British Grand Prix, because that, we could run 3 cars at the British Grand Prix because we had more people and more resources. So we did. And he was fantastic, and I'm certain that he would have been our number 1 driver, for sure.
Well, apart from all that goes with that, it answers Gareth Holt's question, so you'll be pleased about that, Gareth. But why did Teddy do what he did? Why?
It took Tombe.
It was a bluff thing. It was partially bluff, and it was also, sadly, Philip Morris's corporate speak. Tambay was French and pretty, and spoke perfect French, posh French, and they had a big market. They didn't have a big market in Canada, so it was politics, and also, though we the race team wanted to have Villeneuve, night and day. This is our boy, no doubt. So Ferraris thought this as well. So Ferraris called him up, and he flew to Italy and went to see Enzo. And he came back and he was torn. He said to me, Alastair, I want to drive for McLaren's, but Ferraris have offered me a testing contract, and you're not offering me anything. You know, Teddy's just saying, 2 or 3 races at the end of the year, maybe, not for sure, no contract. So he went to see Teddy, and Teddy said, okay, you know, just call their bluff. Tell them that you either have a full contract or nothing. And off he went, and Teddy said, see, he'll be back in a minute, because he'll go to Ferraris and they'll tell him to bugger off. And he'll be back, and we'll have him. He went to Ferraris and said, all or nothing. They said, okay, all. That was it. We lost the driver. And he wanted to drive for McLaren's.
Yeah.
He didn't want to drive for Ferraris.
That's absolutely right.
That's a moment in history. Absolutely. Incredible.
So Teddy tried to call his bluff, and it didn't work. Ferraris called our bluff and hired him. And he would have been a fantastic McLaren driver. He just suited us perfectly. The way he came, because we didn't look after our drivers at all. You know, we just told them, be at Monza on the 23rd. We didn't say how you're going to get there, who's going to hold your hand, who's going to buy your airline ticket. Just don't forget your helmet, because they would. There's the helmet.
Or if you do your race without it.
I started because once I got the job, I put lockers in the truck for them and a spare helmet and overalls in the truck. So they would turn up with the new stuff or whatever, but if they didn't have the new stuff in the truck, it was an old set of stuff.
Great stuff. Okay, well done, Alastair Caldwell, and thank you very much for coming in just ahead of your next adventure. Panama, right?
Yes, there's a thing called the Maya Classic, and starts in Panama, goes up to Veracruz in Mexico, 7 countries in a month. Finishes on the 18th of March. Should be good fun in my 280 SL Mercedes.
Trusty old Mac.
Yeah, it's done 2 London to Sydney's, London to Cape Town. It's been all over the world, this car. It's only just finished crossing South America from one side to the other.
Good cars, Mercedes-Benz, although other cars are available.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Look forward to it. Can I just remind you, everybody, before we go, as we said about half an hour ago, we're doing a very special thing in our July edition of Motorsport on Brands Hatch 76. And we want you to contact us, please. If you were there, get in touch. It's hashtag Brands76 on social media, or just email us editorial@motorsportmagazine.com. Okay? Hashtag Brands76, email editorial@motorsportmagazine.com. Great to have you with us again. Really, thanks so much for your support. We're getting more and more of you all the time. Makes our web editor smile. Thank you, Alan Hyde, for recording it all for us, as ever, hidden away in the corner. Thank you, Simon Aaron, Nigel Roebuck, our editor, Damien Smith, and most of all to you, Alastair. See you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.